welcome to My Baking Journey, a podcast for bakers where you get to hear from some of the great minds in the baking industry. My name is Haf.
And my name is Rachel. I'm a baker. I know what it's like to be baking all day alone in my kitchen, experiencing the frustrations and struggles with no one else to guide or support me through it.
And I'm not a baker, but I've witnessed all the ups and downs that come with this industry and where it's hard to get a little bit of extra help.
So if you're looking for advice, tips, and amazing insight from various experienced bakers, you've come to the right place.
So let's give you a little insight into what's in store for you this week.
I've always been quite driven, and I think with cakes, my ultimate goal was to always get my husband out of his mining job. The thing that I love the most about cake decorating, and that maybe isn't mentioned enough, is how healing it is. When you are creative with your hands, it is very healing. And I had a lot of insecurity, self-limiting beliefs. I did not have a very good relationship with myself. I was quite toxic inside. And along the way, as my cakes got more beautiful, I was able to express myself more. I came up with this idea of doing the templates because I was making like these letter and number cakes, but I was like cutting out pieces of paper and I have to like resize them to like fit the tins, and then you put them on the cake and they'd go soggy. And I was like, oh, there has to be like a reusable thing that I can use. And so then the idea of like a reusable acrylic template was born. And I remember so many people messaged me and they're like, thank you, I needed to hear that. And I was like, yeah, just do it. What have you got to lose? I didn't really realize that until I started meeting people in person. Wow, this is crazy. The journey I've shared that was so important for my own growth has helped other people because I guess I shared a lot of that growth. What do I want from this business going forward? How do I want this business to support our family? I've been setting lots of intention around what I want for it going forward, because you could make all the money in the world and be so successful and be miserable, and I don't want that.
Toowomba Australia, which is in Queensland, in case you were curious, is not a place we ever thought we'd end up. But it's here that there is a brand that's known worldwide, Cas Cakery. Cassie, or Cas, speaks with us today about her journey. And what is so interesting here is that in such a short space of time, she has rocketed her business from nothing to something incredible in just 5 short years. What I love about Cassie is she reminds us about being honest about ourselves, reminding ourselves to make it fun, and most importantly, just taking care of ourselves. The stress of running a baking business can take its toll on all of us. Cassie has been very good about making sure she looks after herself mentally, physically, and emotionally. Doing this has only allowed herself to blossom further in her business and push herself forward even more. Of course, she didn't always do it this way. She had to learn. I mean, she's hit that burnout stage multiple times where frustration is running really high. But through all that, she's learned to watch for it before it happens so she can deal with it better. I think this is a skill that we don't all have. So this is why this episode makes for a great listen. Seeing those signs that suggest you need to adjust what you're doing. Do you struggle with burnout, resentment, frustration? Keep listening. There might be something in this that will help you take it all in your stride and manage it better. I really hope you enjoy this one. Let's rock on with Cassie's baking journey. I'm just finally glad we finally had a chance to be able to catch you.
Sorry.
With our crazy time zones. I know. Your crazy life and everything else that's going on around it. But I just wanted to say a big thanks. And also, today we record this. I think it's quite cool that this is International Women's Day.
It is. Actually, it is really cool. Maybe we were meant to record it on this day.
Exactly. I think this is just really interesting that we get you, who is, I would consider, a rather prominent baker in our industry, who's been around for quite a few years now and has, I can't imagine how many people you've inspired and whose people you've probably lifted along the way and directed along the way. So it's really cool that we get you for an hour or so just to have a chat. Honestly, it's brilliant. I'm just going to jump right into this as I like to do. And one of the things that we really like to do on this podcast is obviously we're going to talk about you and your business and your brand and all that comes with it. But first, we have to really understand a bit more about who you are, especially for a lot of our listeners who are not in Australia, who are in Europe and in the Americas and wherever else in the world that we get people, right? So, and I'm just going to phrase it like this. Based on all that you do today, a busy life, 4 kids, running your own business, you've got everything else that's going on around you. That's not something for everyone. You need to be either, I don't know, a highly motivated person or just very driven, or you just want to get stuff done. So where can we attribute these sorts of get it done qualities to? Have you had them your whole life, or is this just born out of the recent decade?
I have always been a bit of a go-getter. I've always been a person that if I set my mind to something, it would happen one way or another. It's probably very hard being my mother when I was little, because when I got an idea in my head, it needed to happen. And if it didn't, I probably chucked a tantrum. So I've always been quite driven. And I think with cakes, my ultimate goal was to always get my husband out of his mining job. That was like my ultimate goal. And that was before cakes. I set that goal like, I think nearly 8. Actually, no, it was more like 9 years ago. I set a goal that I would one day be able to get a business to a point where he could step away from a mining job. He was working underground in a mine. And I was like, it's not a very nice place to work. And it's 14-hour days. It was 7 days in a row. And I really wanted to be able to somehow get to a point where he could walk away from that so that we could have a better family life. That was my like driving goal. And I think sometimes when you have goals that are based around a higher good for everybody involved, it's very easy to like really go for it. I didn't know what it was that was going to get me to that point, but that was always my driving force. And when I first started cakes, I would never have thought that it would get to this, but that was always like my underlying thing, that I really wanted to cultivate this amazing family lifestyle where Jared could be more present with us and not have to like have this financial burden on his shoulders that he had to stay in this job he didn't like. So that was, I think, the starting point.
We should put this in context here, because Jared's a big part of your life. You two have been married for how many years?
15 years. So we got married when we were 19.
Okay.
We were babies.
Yeah. So this, and then married by 19, 4 kids by the age of 27.
By 27.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for context for our listeners, I can understand why you wanted to get him out. If he's been in mining for so many years, I think it's brilliant that you've sort of put him first.
The whole time we had children. So he started in the mines just before I had our first child. So my children didn't know any different to this shift work. And I was like, there has to be a better life than this. And don't get me wrong, the mines provided a great income, a great stability. I was able to be a stay-at-home mum, which was something I always wanted. I always wanted to be able to be at home with my children. I never had to put them into daycare because I found different ways to like make money from home. But ultimately, once the kids were old enough to go to school, now it's my turn to like step in and try and figure out a way to make this a better family life.
You have a few siblings as well, right? How many siblings? You're 6?
Yeah. I'm from a family of 6 and Jared's from a family of 10.
Wow. Okay. So your siblings shape your childhood in many ways, right? Either you align to some of them or you may not to others. You may be very different. Are there other entrepreneurs in your family that have set something up prior to you?
I have a brother, but I left Tasmania. I was born in Tasmania, and that's where all of my family are except for me. So I left home when I was 16. Would not recommend it. I was still a kid, really. But I think leaving home early, I've looked after myself for a long time. I always was good at getting jobs, being able to find a way to provide for myself. I would do house cleaning and babysitting from the age of 12. I always had this, I want this, how do I get there? If I do X, Y, Z, I'll get there thing. I have a brother that's very much like that. But also I feel sometimes when I was growing up in my family, I felt like I didn't quite fit in because I always felt like I was destined for something big, but I didn't know what it was. Whereas a lot of them were just happy to go along, whereas I was like, no, my life is going to be big and important, but I don't know what.
I love that. It's like dreaming big, right? You're actually manifesting the life that you want. It's that restlessness and inability to actually just sit still and have the status quo and have the normal life, where there's no problem with having a normal life. But if you are restless and you do want something bigger, it just eats at you, and it pushes you and it drives you. Were you particularly driven at school? Was school a good environment for you?
I was actually quite academically bright, but I did not apply myself. I had zero interest in study.
It's amazing, isn't it, how you can do that?
So I actually finished high school in grade 10. I didn't even go all the way through.
In Australia, you don't have to finish. Is that how it works?
No, so you don't have to do year 11 and 12 as long as you're working.
Okay.
When I started a hairdressing apprenticeship, it wasn't for me. So then I just went into the workforce.
I see. How long did you try the hairdressing for?
Only 6 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I actually quit a lot of jobs. If somebody was rude to me or something happened, I would just be like, no, I'm not working here. And then I realized all along, I just work so much better for myself. I don't need somebody telling me what to do. I'm quite good at being, okay, this is what we need to do and let's get it done. And I realize that's not for everyone. Sometimes I guess when you're self-employed, some people find it like hard to be motivated in that, but that was never really something I struggled with because I always would be working towards some sort of goal, whether it was big or small. I would be working towards something. So I found it very easy. I found I was a really good boss. I used to get frustrated with myself sometimes if I overworked myself, but then I didn't have anybody else to complain to about myself.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're the only ones that can figure this out. We need to like scale back. We need to not burn out. And so it was like learning to like juggle self-care enough so that I didn't get to that point as well.
It's so cool because you're talking to a couple of entrepreneurs, or we're so-called entrepreneurs ourselves with our company. But we do find it amazing that what we've learned, even in limited school that you may have and not a continuing education, how so much of that doesn't need to apply and how so much of what you do today came from other factors. Just the concept of self-motivation alone is something that is very hard to teach, but you have that in you. And the responsibility that you put on yourself, again, is something that you became familiar with at a very early age, maybe because of partly related to you moving out so early at 16, and all of a sudden you'll become the responsible adult. You better do something about it, right? To feed yourself and get yourself somewhere and all this.
Yeah.
So I can see how when you start that way, you have a really good likelihood of being successful because you are very committed to what it is you want to do, whether it's the business, whether it's the family and having several children and making sure that all works at home.
Yeah.
So I think that's the part that I find very inspiring. And I like to make sure you get a chance to mention that because a lot of times that doesn't get mentioned enough. If we go back far enough, there's so much there in our history of growing up that really helps shape where we get to today. So it's really cool to hear that story. I think from here, what would be really interesting to understand is then you get to the point of baking, but what's the triggering point that set you off down this journey of baking? Did you always do it growing up?
So I loved home ec, which is the cooking class at school. I don't know if you guys call it home ec. So I loved home ec and I loved art. And I didn't even realize this was a way of meshing the two together because I loved art because I was able to be expressive and I could express it in my own way. There's no set way of doing art. Everybody just has their own unique way of expressing themselves through art. And I loved home ec because I always cooked growing up, not necessarily baked, but I always cooked. I always enjoyed cooking for my family. I liked experimenting with flavors. I never followed recipes. I'd always just be like, oh, this is going to go well with that sort of thing. And then I think in a way, when I first started cakes, if you scroll all the way back on my Instagram, you can see where I started. Like, I've got nothing to hide. Like, you can see.
Yeah, I saw. I actually did.
Did you go back? 3,000 some posts?
Yeah, I did. It did take me a good half hour.
So you can see where I started.
Okay.
But the thing that I love the most about cake decorating, and that maybe isn't mentioned enough, is how healing it is. When you are creative with your hands, it is very healing. And I had a lot of insecurity, self-limiting beliefs. I did not have a very good relationship with myself. It was quite toxic inside. And along the way, as my cakes got more beautiful and I was able to express myself more, because often when you're a cake decorator and you're starting out, you'll have this picture in your head of what you want this cake to look like. And then you make the cake and it looks nothing like the picture in your head. And you get frustrated because why can't I translate this?
Always.
They can. You're looking at people that have been doing cakes for years and their cakes look probably how they want them to look. And I used to get frustrated with that because in my head, they're so much prettier. Why aren't they coming out like that? But as my cakes got prettier, I actually feel like the relationship with myself got prettier and it turned into this beautiful self-discovery, healing journey that I didn't even know I needed. As the cakes evolved, I evolved so much. I'm not even remotely the same person I was when I very first started cakes. So I feel like cakes was always my destiny. It was a part of unlocking who I was as a person. And it's been so healing and therapeutic when you like look at all the colors and the textures and everything that you can use. Cakes are just another way of telling a story. I think I came back to like that part of myself in high school where I could do art and not be judged and express myself. And now I can do that with an edible medium. And then somebody is purchasing it to share with their loved ones for a special occasion. I'm like, it's such a beautiful thing that you're part of people's most beautiful celebrations in their life. That's a real honor.
Yeah.
Do you think, just listening to you then as you were developing your cakes and getting better and better by each one, and I relate to you there on that journey because it is a frustration, right? When you first start off as a cake maker, I know I was looking at some amazing cake artists, think like Posh Little Cakes when I started off, and I was like, I just want my cakes to look like hers. And I know I've talked about that previously, but it's frustrating because you are like, I really want to get to that stage. And do you think the cakes gave you that inner confidence? Because I've certainly found that through getting to a stage where my cakes are now, I can recognize that it's one of my cakes if I put it out there. It's like an inner confidence in myself that I can actually create something that is beautiful and is a piece of art that, I don't know, it just gives me something deep inside that I thought, I wonder if Cass relates to that too.
Oh, 100%. And now my cakes turn out better than they were in my head because often like I just go with it rather than, I think I also went through this stage and I've had issues with trying to control stuff. I want to control everything and I want it to be perfect. And whenever I teach, I always tell people like, just get rid of the notion that you can have something perfect and be creative because perfection and creativity do not go together. So like when I just go to do a cake and I'm like, okay, whatever's going to come out, it's going to come out. And often it'll turn out different than I even thought it was going to be. And it's more beautiful than the picture I had in my head because I just went with it and just let it flow. Like overthinking, I think some people when they overthink or they try to make something too perfect, it actually wrecks the flow of creativity.
Yeah, it's almost that you have to master the basics. So I think this is where it took a lot of my time was like just getting that confident that I could create a really clean cake, clean edges and clean designs to then now I can just flow with a cake because I know even if I make some mistakes or the drip doesn't turn out perfect or I do a swirl that I don't like, in the grand scheme of things, it will all look perfect. Yeah. And there's something so liberating about being in that flow state when you're decorating because you don't think about anything else. You just, I don't know, you just transcend somewhere else, right?
Yeah. You're like in your own little world. And some cakes I purposely will not video myself doing because I'm like, no, this cake is too special to video. I just want to enjoy this moment with myself and the cake.
Can I just go back earlier into your journey? Because I read that you decided to take cake seriously as a business after someone in the local area reported you to the council. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was just literally doing them for friends and family. I wasn't even making a profit. I would be lucky if I was even covering my ingredients. I was posting them on my personal Facebook wall. So I wasn't posting them in a public forum as such. And the council knocked on my door and they were like, oh, we've seen your cakes on Facebook. And I was like, oh, well, somebody obviously had to have shown you because they're not like on a public forum. And they were actually really nice. And they're like, you're actually really talented. Are you self-taught? And I was like, yeah, like you can tell. And then they were like, we feel like you should take the appropriate steps to get registered. And I was like a little bit like triggered that somebody would like go out of their way to report me. But then I'm also a huge believer that the universe is always like working with me. And this was like the kick up the butt that I needed. I was like, I either take myself seriously and register as a business, or I just quit and be like, oh, well, I had fun. And just prior to this, I'd literally paid $1,500, which at the time was a lot of money for our family. I paid $1,500 to do a certificate in fitness, which is quite ironic because it's like the complete opposite of the sugar industry. I'd paid $1,500 to do this course, and then the council was like, you should register. And it was like $660 to register. My husband is very logical. Jared has the most logic brain ever. And he said, Cassie, all you need to do is make back the 660 and you haven't gained anything or lost anything. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And he's like, and either way, I'll support you. And I was like, okay. So then I had my kitchen registered within 2 weeks, and then I was booked out every week from there for like 3 years until I was like, oh, I'm overworking myself. I better scale it back.
Well, was that just from people in your Facebook private network that just started wanting you for?
I have no idea. If I knew who it was, I would probably send them a bouquet of flowers and be like, thank you. You were like a pivotal moment in my career.
So effectively, you've been in that really fortunate position of being able to turn on a business and go, but you haven't had any opportunity here to stop and think about, oh, I'm about to go start a business. Here are the things in my mind that I should probably address, like pricing or how I'm going to deal with keeping on top of, I don't know, stock of certain items or all this. So you obviously had to mature. You probably made lots of mistakes along the way. Mm-hmm. But what were you learning about that period, about yourself and about what you were doing? It wasn't obviously enough to push you out of it because you're so busy making cakes. But what else was going on in your mind when you started out like that?
Well, I've always just come in one of those people that's like, oh, well, I'll just give it my all and see how this goes. So number one, I was very much undercharging by a lot. But also, I feel like this also reflects your mindset. I didn't really think I was worthy of getting more money, and I didn't value my skill. So I was probably getting what I thought I was worth at the time. And that was something that I think was a personal journey for me, that I needed to learn my worth along the way as a cake decorator. I also suffered a lot from like imposter syndrome. I was like, I'm not qualified in anything. I don't have any qualifications. So who am I to charge this or that sort of thing? But then also, it's almost like I put myself through my own apprenticeship, really. I learnt along the way, paid myself a crap wage for quite a bit until I got to a point that I was like, oh, I'm actually a skilled cake decorator. Like, I got here. I'm good at this now. Like, yeah, I'm worth this price. So I feel like it was like very much a learning journey of learning my own self-worth. And I think a lot of cake decorators, because a lot of them are mums that want to start a side hustle, a lot of them don't have that self-worth, because as a mum, when you're at home with your children, it's not like you ever have anybody telling you you're doing like a really good job and you deserve a pay rise because just acing this mum gig. Like, a lot of us suffer from low self-esteem, insecurities about ourselves and our self-worth. But cakes for me was like this amazing way to build that self-worth. And that's why I'm very passionate about like empowering women and telling them like, charge your worth, know your worth, go and like learn who you are and find love for yourself, because the more work that you do with yourself, like self-love, self-care, it helps your business to flourish. My business started to really flourish when I started to love myself, and I feel like it was a flow-on effect. The more I worked on who I was as a person and my core beliefs and all that sort of thing, my business just naturally flourished, and my family, like everybody around me, benefited from me taking care of myself. And I think a lot of women, especially in this industry, it's really bad for burnout because they don't know how to say no. They just want to take all the orders because they don't want to let anyone down, and then they burn themselves out, and then they're left with nothing. And then the people around them are the ones that get the sloppy seconds because they've got nothing left to give.
It's interesting you talk about that, because I think there's a balance, isn't there? There's a balance of when you're starting off on that cake journey of getting the confidence, but also being skilled up to a level where you feel that you can charge those kind of prices. So when you're starting off, especially in the cake business, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can charge that. It doesn't look as good as what I've seen on Instagram or all of that. But it's a beautiful journey, as what you were just talking there, is like how your cakes got better and better, that inner confidence, you started to feel more confident. You've probably got a lot of validation back on social media and from your customers. And then it also translates then to later feeling, well, I can charge this. I feel a better person. I can do this. And it's that beautiful journey that you've gone through making cakes. It's a very healing and liberating journey, but there is this real issue of charging the right amount for cakes. And I think it definitely, as you talk about it, it does come from confidence, and it also comes from what someone down the street is charging, what you could buy it in a supermarket, what people knock back and tell you, I'm not paying that for this cake. So many barriers that if you don't have that inner confidence in yourself, you take it really personally.
Yeah, you do.
It's actually, that's universal, because it seems to be one of the number one topics of confusion for any baker who started out or has been doing it for several years, fine-tuning that pricing process.
Yeah.
It's hard for it to come at the beginning because of the fact that you don't have the confidence at the beginning and the imposter syndrome thing. So maybe the advice to a lot of people listening is don't stress too much if you haven't nailed your pricing and you're just starting out, because it will come. Have some confidence there that you're going to get to a point where you'll do something. I mean, practice makes perfect, right? You make 1,000 cakes. That 1,000th cake is going to be much, much better than your first one, right? Just go back and look at your own Instagram feed and figure it out that way. So you were changing when all this started. You had figured out how this was healing you and helping you. I'm curious, did Jared, was he the benefactor of watching you do this in his own way? Like, was his journey changing because he was watching you change? Do you know what I mean by that? It sort of spills onto him.
So for the first couple of years, he wasn't a huge fan because I kept burning myself out. I kept overworking myself. Like I'd have like 10 cakes in a week and he'd be like, why? And I'd be like, I couldn't say no. And then I'm angry because I'm tired and I'm staying up late making cakes. And then my kids are like, you're always making cakes. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And he's like, I thought the whole point of this was so you could spend more time with the kids. So like I went through a lot of that, and the first couple of years were hard. Then I was able to save enough to take us on a holiday to the Maldives, just Jared and myself. And that was a turning point for him because he saw the worth in what I was doing. Like, as in, there was a monetary value. We were able to do something that prior to that we didn't have the extra cash to do. He said to me that was his turning point with, oh, this business is actually helping our family. And then he would always like say to the kids, we wouldn't be able to go on these holidays if it wasn't for mummy working. And around that time, so that was, I think, 3 years in. So I've been doing it for 5 years. No, it was before COVID. So it must have been 2019. That's when he started referring to my cakes as work. Before that, it was a hobby. I think it was more so because he wasn't there a lot because he was like doing shift work and that. And then when he was home, I wasn't really available. So it probably was something that he was a bit resentful to be honest. I got resentful to it too. I was like, why don't I take cakes this week? I just wanted to hang out with you. So yeah, after the Maldives, he started referring to it as work. And so then if the kids would say something, he'd be like, not now, mummy's working. What can I do for you? He started picking up more of the stuff around because I was like on a mission to prove like I'm of worth. I can do this. I can do it all. And then I obviously would end up in burnout. So then he started calling at work. He would tell the kids, no, mummy's working today. You need to look after yourself a little bit more, or like, I can do this and that sort of thing. And he'd like stepped in and helped with the other stuff around the house so that I wasn't doing everything. And then
very much a partnership.
Yeah. And then I developed the templates with a lovely mum in Emerald who had a laser business. So I came up with this idea of doing the templates because I was making like these letter and number cakes, but I was like cutting out pieces of paper and I have to like resize them to like fit the tins, and then you put them on the cake and they'd go soggy. And I was like, oh, there has to be like a reusable thing that I can use. And so then the idea of like a reusable acrylic template was born. And she showed me this material she had and I really liked it because it was nice and thin. It was flexy but very stable. And if you dropped it, it wouldn't shatter or anything, because some of the thicker acrylic ones I'd heard if you dropped them, they could shatter and they didn't have that flex in them and that sort of thing. I think I had 20,000 followers when I first released my templates. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if no one buys them? Then I was like, oh, people like my stuff. This is exciting. And they were navy blue when we first started. And I learned a lot of lessons about business I had no idea how to set up like a partnership with someone, that sort of thing. So we learnt lots of lessons along the way. But Jared wasn't very invested in it then. He was like, oh yeah, it's just some side money. And then I think after the first full year of doing templates, he realized how much I'd generated on top of my cake business. And he was like, oh, there's actually something here. I was like, yeah, I don't know how it happened, but he like started stepping in slightly. But every time he did, I'd like push back and be like, no, this is my baby. How dare you? And he'd be like, there has to be a better way of shipping these. Because I was handwriting every parcel with a name and address and waiting in line at the post office to ship them all. And he's like, there has to be a better way to do this, Cassie. Like, it's 2020. Surely there's like a better way than handwriting these parcels. And within a day, he'd like set up this shipping system that spoke to my website and I could print my own labels. And originally when he said it, I was like, no, there isn't. I just need to go to the post office. Like, it's fine. It's working fine the way it is. and he was like, you're not even making money because of the time that you're spending writing out all these parcels and going to the post office and standing in line. And so within a day, he had streamlined my process where I could print my own labels and I dropped them off at the counter at the post office and they all just got scanned. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Life changing, right? Just getting another set of eyes to come in and actually look at your process. Especially, and that can be sometimes really hard when you've had full control of it and you've grown it, it's your baby. But actually, just thinking about the time, we do loads of labels here, and I just like thinking about the time that it would take to handwrite those amount of labels. And also like the journey that you've gone on. I mean, now you manufactured them yourself, right? And you've got alphabet, number, unicorn, rainbow, heart, and so much more. It's constantly on my social media feed.
They've become so popular. Often you'll just open Instagram and there's a reel with one of my templates and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, but it came from a real place of need, right? And that's why I always find like successes do come in business because you're actually solving a problem. And cutting out your own templates or to be able to bake it direct or to be able to cut it straight after, it just saves so much time. And also you don't have to keep those templates in drawers or cut them out of baking sheets or you indefinitely don't, you get a wonky line and all sorts of stuff. That's what I think is the amazing journey, that you've solved a problem.
Yeah.
And through solving that problem, you've persisted and persisted. And I'm really interested to hear how it's going today. Isn't it Jared that manages the business today?
Literally.
Did that earn him the right, though, to join your company then when he did streamline your shipping?
Well, not straight away. I still gave him a lot of pushback. It was really interesting because I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then he was like, you tell me you want me to step into your business, but every time I come to you with this idea, you push me out. So it was like this real thing that I had to be like, okay, Cas Cakery is my baby, but it's gotten to a point where I want him to step in. Why am I pushing back? It was just like Cas Cakery represented all of my growth, everything I'd been through. And I was like, I don't want to give it away. And it wasn't that I wanted, like, he's my husband. I love him so much. And I so badly wanted him to be part of it. But I think I'd attached so much to like what it had become that opening it up and being like, okay, come in and help me run this. And maybe you have good ideas too. And maybe some of your ideas are actually better than mine. And it probably took 6 months to fully welcome him in. Like we had lots of arguments, communication issues, because I was just like, like it's my baby. I don't know. It's like somebody coming and be like, oh, I'm just going to take your child and look after it for you now. And you're like, no, that's my child. I know how to look after it. I've been looking after it for this long. But now he does full production. We've invested a lot of money into like Cas Cakery. We have 2 big lasers. We do all of our own manufacturing. Well, Jared does. And he's come up with so many different shapes. He's got like really great ideas. His brain is so logical that all of like the formatting, he creates all of the shapes. So if someone says to us, oh, I'd really like a teddy bear shape, or I'd really like this, or I'd really like that, he will create it. Then he'll come back to me, being the cake decorator, and be like, how do you think this will cut out? Do you think it's going to look like a blob, or will you be able to see the shape? And I'll be like, oh, you need to alter this because if you did, that's going to be annoying to cut around. And he'll be like, I had that. I wouldn't want to cut here, here, and here. Can we like chunk this up or do this? And then he'll reformat it. And then he's like, what do you think? And I'll be like, yes, that's going to look amazing. So now we're like a real team of, I needed his logic groundedness, but my dreaming, manifesting personality is what helped this be born. And I don't know if you've ever heard of human design, but I'm a manifester and he's a generator. So manifestors are like the ones that like we see the vision and we don't need to see it in person to know that it's not going to happen. Like we can just believe in that. Whereas he's like very logical and generators are like workhorses. And so manifestors and generators together, the manifestor's like, this is my vision. The generator's like, I'm the muscle. I'll get it there. So
we are laughing because Cass, Rachel is the manifestor and I'm the generator in Alba. No question. No question whatsoever. It's exactly our role. So we're just laughing at this. I feel like I'm talking to a mirror.
So together we work well.
Absolutely.
Sometimes he needs to like bring me back down to earth because I'll be like too far off. And he's like, oh, we just need to be grounded for a bit now. He's always been very grounding and very safe. And I feel like now Cas Cakery is in such a safe space because we're working on it together. We have the same goals and dreams. And there was another thing we had to work on though, which was like finding time to like put business talk aside. Because obviously when you live together, he'd go to work and be driving a loader for 12 hours and his brain would just be like, duh. And then he'd come home and I'm like, Jared's home, we can have dinner together. And then he'd sit down at the table and start talking business. And I was like, no. I've been doing cakes all day. Like, I don't want to talk about business. I just want to talk about family. And then he'd be like, but I've been thinking about this all day. So there was also like these times that we had to figure out like, okay, we can't have business consume us because we both were very excited about where it was going to go. And then I was like, I don't want to talk about business all the time. Let's talk about something other than business. But I think we're good now because everything's happened how we wanted it to, but we did put a lot of groundwork in the last year. Last year was a massive year of travel, like investing money and like trusting that like we're on the right path. It's all coming to fruition. And we also like decided we were going to relocate our family after I'd been in Emerald for 16 years. So I'd spent my whole adult life there with Jared and we were like, we want to relocate because we want Cas Cakery to expand to the next level of what we see it as. Last year was a massive year, huge. And I think I did burn myself out slightly, but I knew I needed to get it to a point that so that when I moved, I could have like 3 to 4 months with my kids to settle them without having to actively make cakes or anything like that. So it's all been worth it for like where I am right now.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask. You know you're about to go bake a cake, right? Or maybe you're making one right now. A really nice and expensive tall cake with some beautiful decorations and maybe some dried flowers or a large topper. What are you going to box that in when you give that to the customer? Please don't tell me you're going to use extenders and staple that to a standard flimsy box and then wrap the thing in plastic and then give that to the customer hoping for the best. I have a better idea. Why don't you try Alba tall cake boxes? They're gorgeous, strong, they come in 14 or 20 inches tall. You can easily put them together and they're perfect for your beautiful cakes. I mean, you've just spent 4 or 5 hours making this thing. Show it off in something that's going to elevate your brand to another level and then wow the customer. Check them out at www.olba.shop. That's OLBAA. All right, back to the show.
Well, let's talk about that because you've been on the road teaching, right? And that's a real 360 because you've gone from this position of training yourself up and doing like hundreds of cakes, probably thousands of cakes, generating such beautiful social media content. Your cakes are outstanding. They've always got like some stencils or drips or flowers, pastels, just beautiful looking cakes. So now to get to that place where you're now giving back and helping that community that you've grown out of, but also are in.
Yeah.
Like, how does that feel to be now teaching and also to be in a role model in the baking community?
I honestly feel like it's such an honor. People wanting to come and learn from me. When I first got asked to teach, I was like, I don't know how to teach. And I remember speaking to, her name's Melita. She used to own Loyal Bakeware, if you've heard of Loyal Bakeware. And I rung her. She was always like, I called her my cake mum because she'd been in the industry for so long. I rung her and I was like, I've been asked to teach, but I don't know how to teach. I just pipe the cupcakes. And she said, next time you pipe the cupcake, I want you to pay really close attention to what your hand does, the amount of pressure you apply, like really like focus on what it is that you're doing when you're piping. Because obviously I'd piped so many cupcakes that I feel like you almost get like muscle memory that you don't even think about it. You just like do it. And so I watched my hands, like I fully like immersed myself in watching what I did when I applied pressure, the flick of my wrist, like all of that. And I was like, oh, I just need to teach people this. And again, a little bit of that imposter syndrome, like, who am I to teach? I don't have any qualifications. I'm just like living in Emerald, like working out of the world's smallest kitchen making cupcakes and stuff. But you know what? I actually think self-taught people are really good teachers because we have figured it out along the way. So we know all these little tips and tricks that you could tell people one thing about the flick of a wrist and it could change the whole outcome of how they pipe. So I just applied that. I was completely myself and I just went into the teaching world. This is how it works for me. This is how I find it. There's not one right way to do it. You might find that you do it differently and that's okay because we all do things differently. But I just taught how I taught myself. I was like, this is how I find it easy. Always like setting the intention that you're coming to learn a skill. You're not going to walk away a perfectionist because I think a lot of people get disheartened and they go to a class and they don't walk away and their work is exactly the same as yours. So I always like to set intentions. I'm like, we're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy. We're here to learn a skill. And that skill is something you can build on outside of this class or, you know, go to multiple classes and that sort of thing. And I really loved the in-person interaction. I loved like meeting people. I loved the energy of like people coming together and they're excited to learn a new skill. And again, it's healing. People coming together to create something beautiful with their hands. It's always, to me, is like it's a healing experience. And I look at teaching as that I'm passing on something that healed me and I'm passing on like my love for that and what it's done for me. So yeah, teaching for me is like really special. I really enjoy it. I love it. It also sometimes turns into like a bit of a psychology lesson because I'm like, I'll share like my story of how I learned to love myself and that sort of thing. And it's funny, a lot of people that come to classes end up, one of them was like, I loved what I learned, but I loved listening to what you had to say more. We all seek connection and we all want to be part of community. And that's what teaching is to me. It's sharing my love for what I do with a community that wants to learn from me.
And you're building, as we speak, your new cake studio. You'll be teaching there as well?
Yes. And I'll also be hosting other teachers. My vision for it is that I will teach what I love and then I'll get other people to come in and authentically teach what they love. Because often in cake studios, I find, and I completely understand it, they want you to use products that they sell that are important to them. Like not always that you can go and teach and use exactly what you love to use for like everything. Like often you need to work within the perimeter of what somebody else wants you to do. So I want to give people that freedom to come and teach their authentic stuff and stuff that I don't do, like cookies, royal icing cookies, fondant, sugar flowers. I've made so many amazing connections within the industry and I'm like, this is me giving back to them. I would love to host them and be able to like bring people together to learn from someone else. And I guess having my own studio and not having the overheads of like a big running shop, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to facilitate that. So
yeah,
that's something I'm really excited to do. And also just be able to teach whatever I want to teach, however I want to teach it.
On the subject of your own tools, and you're going to have to clarify how I pronounce this. So ermine or ermine buttercream?
Ermine.
Ermine. Okay. I thought ermine in my head because I'd lived in Australia at one point and I thought, how would an Australian say this? And I think, I'm sure they might say ermine. So that's why I'm going with ermine. Okay. So tell us what it is, why you got into developing it, and why you like using it.
Okay. So first things first, I'm not a sweet tooth at all. I'm a savory person. When I started baking, you kind of experiment with different buttercreams to see what you like. I found American buttercream very sweet. And I was like, oh, it's too sweet for me. And at that time, I wasn't really thinking about other people. I was just thinking about myself. So I was like, yeah, no, that's too sweet for me. And then I tried Swiss and I found that very buttery. I liked the consistency, but it was just very buttery. And then I tried a version of ermine and like I tasted it and I piped with it. So it piped beautifully. And then I tasted it. I was like, this is delicious. I got Jared to taste it. They tasted it and they were all like, oh, Mum, that's really yum. And it wasn't sickly sweet. It was like smooth, creamy, not sweet. It's sweet enough, but not sweet. You can make it sweeter by adding stuff if you want to. And so then I was like, oh, I like this. But I spent like a year tweaking it to get like the perfect consistency because Emerald is really quite hot. It's like central Queensland. Summers were like often 40 degrees. I was like, I needed something really stable that could like sit at room temperature and not melt. And so ermine has a milk and flour pudding mix or a roux, whatever you want to call it, that is like cooked in advance, sets in the fridge. You whip butter and sugar and then you whip that into it with like vanilla bean paste. So it's really easy to color as well. So it ticked all the boxes. And the more I like used it, I was like, I can stencil with it. I can pipe with it. I can create texture. I was like, I can do everything I want. I don't need to switch between ganache and buttercream. I could literally do everything with this. And I had cakes traveling like 300 kilometers and they weren't moving. They were just staying. Yeah, like this buttercream does everything that I want to do. I can be creative with it. I can make it any color, that sort of thing. And I like simplicity because I had 4 children. So I didn't want to be making 3 different buttercreams or ganaches or whatever, like for different things. Yeah, I just want something that I can use for everything. And so that fit the bill for that. And then I developed like mud cakes, which actually a lot of UK people have bought my mud cake recipes and they've converted to them. I know it's not
They're
traditionally.
Nice. Mud cakes are lovely.
Yeah, I love mud cake. And so again, simplicity with mud cake, my recipes could be used for cupcakes, sheet cakes and stacking cake. So rather than having to use different recipes for different things, I wanted to be versatile and I like that it lasts like 2 weeks. So then like you could bake in advance. I'd have my baking days and I could structure all of it around my children. So it all came from like wanting versatility and like simplicity.
And something that worked in your environment as well, because decorating in 35-degree heat is no joke, or transporting it. You've got a butter base, it's just going to collapse.
I figure if it's stable in that weather, it can like be stable in any weather.
That's amazing. That's really cool. And so you start putting this stuff out there on your social and you're working with this new buttercream. And what's the response that you were getting from people? Did you have a big following at this time when you introduced this, or were you still quite small?
I was always using it from day one. When I started sharing on social media, I was using that. So I had 1,100 followers in November 2018, which was the year that I started.
Okay.
By the following year, I had 100,000 followers. So like it went up really fast.
In a year.
Yeah. And I was like, this is crazy.
I remember you blowing up, Cass. But I remember what was really special about it, because it was about the time I was getting into cake making as well. So I do remember your account just blow. But what I loved about your account at the time, I don't think a lot of other businesses were doing, you actually took us behind the scenes, but it wasn't behind the scenes in a time lapse manner, like where it was all sped up at 100 miles an hour. You actually filmed, I don't know, you got the correct speed so I could watch you. Your stenciling was quite hypnotic. I just remember watching you bring out all these vast array of stencils, every different cake. And you would just, I think you just really raised the flag on stencils, and you would just stencil and then you'd put some dashes of buttercream and a few swirls and put the flowers in place. And it just looked so put together. And then it would just, you just swirl it around. And I was like, so for me, when I think about your account and how you blew up, number one comes to my head is like queen of stencils, queen of like just taking us on that journey of your cakes being absolutely beautiful, but there was a behind the scenes element.
Yeah, and I remember trying to find videos because I'm a very visual learner. Like I could watch someone do something, I can do it. And I was like, why is no one sharing videos? I'll share my own videos. Maybe it will help someone. And I shared them. Like my hairdresser said to me, you should share videos. I really like watching cake videos. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, I'll try and video some. And then so I did. And then, yeah, it just grew and grew. And I have a subscription group now where I share a lot of my real-time videos. I have like exclusive discount codes and stuff in there because it got to a point where social media was taking up so much of my time that I was like, what do I do? And I haven't made a cake since December. I don't share as much as I used to, but all of those videos are still there. You could scroll back and watch all of them. And I also I remember decorating cakes and I'd just be like chatting away and I'd just be like, I'm just talking to my friends. And I remember there was one video where I was like, if you've been thinking about starting a cake business, you should just do it. And I remember so many people messaged me and they're like, thank you. I needed to hear that. And I was like, yeah, just do it. What have you got to lose? And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we all just like need a push, or we need somebody just to be like, yeah, I believe in you. You can do it. And the amount of people that have messaged me over the years and they were like, I followed you from like the very beginning and you inspired me to start my business. And it's pretty magical, but also like I always turn it back and I'm like, no, I didn't do it. I might have had given you like the self-belief that you needed. I was like, but you did it. I didn't do the work. That's all on you. And then they're like, oh, yeah, I did do it. And I'm like, don't give me credit for your business. I didn't come and work in your kitchen. All I said was, if I can do it, you can do it.
But I think because of this industry that you do work on your own a lot, like just hearing another voice from on social where our community actually lives, it can be so impactful because you don't go to the office or you don't go to the shop or wherever you go to work and have like a team of people that you can bounce ideas off.
Yeah.
Those people online in this baking community are really powerful. So what you do say has massive impact.
I didn't really realize that until I like started meeting people in person. And I was like, wow, like this is crazy. The journey I've shared that was so important for my own growth has helped other people because I guess I shared a lot of that growth.
You mentioned burnout quite a few times, Cassie. So give us some advice here. How do you deal with burnout? What do you do? Do you now know it's coming and you slow down beforehand, or you just get burned out, take a couple of weeks off? Like, well, how do you deal with it?
No, I got really good at self-care last year. So even when I knew I was really busy, I would always schedule in downtime straight after a trip and straight before a trip. So I love alternative therapies. Like I love kinesiology, bioresonance, all those sort of things really resonate with me. So I would like book myself in for a kinesiology appointment and a massage before I went away. And then when I got back, I would have one booked in for like the day after I got back to ground me, massaging, because they always help me relax and like feel good. So I was really good at practicing self-care. So I did practice self-care all throughout that really busy year. It was more so towards the end because in November I was in like 3 different states. So I only spent one weekend at home that month. And then December, packing our house up, and then January we were gone. And I realized a few weeks ago, I was like, oh, I think I burnt myself out a little bit there.
Can you share what that burnout actually feels like at the time? So, someone might be able to...
It's like exhaustion, and it's also resentment. You get resentful to your family because they want part of you and you got nothing left to give. You get resentful to people wanting cakes because you're like, I don't want to make your damn cake, but you've already got it booked in. To me, burnout is I get very resentful to everything around me because what about me? You're giving from an empty cup.
Do you also feel like exhausted where you're just like, I need to just go lie down in the day? Or I can think of many times this might have happened to me.
Yeah. You get exhausted and also sometimes I end up getting sick.
Yeah.
Like I might get like a flu or something and where I force my body's, they're forcing you to rest because you didn't listen to us. I'm like, oh, fine, I'll have a week off and be sick. But I would prefer to have a week off and enjoy my health rather than have a week off and be sick because I've got myself to a point where my body's like, I can't do it anymore.
Do you feel guilty though? I think this is something I struggle with, that actually sitting down and resting, I can probably do it for like a good 2 hours. And then after that, I start to feel guilty that unless I'm physically flawed and ill in bed, but there's a guilt factor, and I don't know whether it's a mum thing or a business owner thing or just a female thing or across the board for everyone, but I definitely feel like, all right, I should be up doing something. Come on, you can get yourself together. Dinner still has to get done, or there's a whole load of jobs, or there's a cake booked in. Do you feel that guilt, or have you...
I used to, but I don't anymore because I've realized now that resting is even more important than being productive, I think, because if you don't rest enough, people that just work, and then like they go to retire and their body completely falls apart. And also like I notice when I stop living, and that sounds weird, but I stop finding joy in things. I stop looking for fun in things. So like I've got to a point where I've like stopped appreciating things because I've got to a point where I'm just surviving. I'm just existing. And I'm like, no, life is like so much more than existing or surviving. And I think also I've noticed there's like this society thing where they glorify being busy and hustling. There's actually something really beautiful about resting and like taking care of yourself. So I used to feel guilty about it, but I did lots of work around that and I was like, no. So yesterday I got a house cleaner come and clean my house, and I went and had a kinesiology session and went to a float tank. And then I came home and we went out for dinner and I was like, I did nothing for anyone and it was bliss.
Such wise words.
Yeah.
That's strong advice.
I needed to hear that today.
You did. You did.
So like next week, just like book a day. And I said to Jared, because Jared was getting ready to come down and visit us, I've been holding so much space for all of the kids because I know like they're going through a lot. And I was like, it's time to hold space for myself. I've booked in all of this stuff for me tomorrow. And he was like, go enjoy your Cassie day. And I was like, thank you, I will. And he sees so much now how happy I am when I look after myself and how that impacts the whole family. Because I feel women often set the tone in our house, whether we like it or not. So when we're resentful towards everything, the kids pick up on it and then they're like naughty. And then it's like this whole thing. So I've noticed now when I'm balanced and rested and happy and my cup's full, tonight I really notice, and it's probably also because Jared's come home. We haven't been living as a family unit for 6 weeks and we've never done this before. Jared's back, I'm rested, and everyone's laughing. I said to Jared, everyone's happy because I'm happy and you're here. This is what life should be. Like there should be laughter. There should be time to play family games and all that sort of stuff. So I think I've just really realized last year was a huge year. And whilst I loved so many moments of it, I realized I got too driven that I wasn't spending enough time with my children and with myself. And like having these few months off, I needed this because I needed to like refocus. And going forward when the studio starts, I'm going to like put in like strict boundaries. No, 1 weekend a month is just family time, no business at all. I'm like, what do I want from this business going forward? How do I want this business to support our family? And like, I've been setting lots of intention around what I want for it going forward, because you could make all the money in the world and be so successful and be miserable, and I don't want that.
Yeah, this is just beautiful advice. I think that's just a great spot to finish on, because I think that's the part that's really key here, that a lot of bakers listening to this will hopefully relate to, but also probably haven't heard anyone tell them before, or for the first time they'll be hearing this. Wow, when was the last time I booked in a day for myself? So that's, Rach, you and I are guilty of this too, running our own business. It's like, for me, I'll work all hours of the day if you let me, but that is not the right way to do it.
I think it's really difficult when you're growing something as well. So there is these, and probably when it's more important to do as well, but it is feel like when you're climbing a mountain, you're on this adrenaline, you want to grow, you want to put as much time and effort into it. But you do have to take stock, and talking to you today, Cassie, definitely helps stop and reflect and go, are we actually building in enough time? And I do think, if I think about my own friendship groups and circles, most of my friends are very busy individuals. That taking time out is felt like a luxury, right?
Whereas I don't think it's a luxury. I think it's a necessity.
And I completely agree with you. We just need more voices like yours.
Rewire it. Normalize taking a break.
Maybe just imagine the mountain has like a break, a stop. There's like a little rest stop with a day spa every 50 meters.
Sounds perfect.
I'm already thinking of like Thailand beaches.
Exactly.
I'm happy with Queensland as well. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in Asia for many years, so that is such a sun and just relaxing. But listen, okay, so we're going to wrap this up. It's super late for you, I know. The one thing that we love to do, though, when we finish any of our calls is just a really quick fire question round with you.
Mm-hmm.
So first thing that comes to mind, you don't have to explain it, or you can if you want. I'm going to go first, and I think I already know the answer to this. If I was to say American buttercream, Swiss meringue buttercream, or ermine buttercream, what would be your preference, Cassie?
Ermine!
I think a lot of people are going to be Googling that now.
I really want to try this ermine. I'm gonna. Anyway, one aspect of baking you won't compromise on.
Quality ingredients.
Okay, brilliant. How about a baking book from your bookshelf?
I don't have any.
Oh, well, maybe yours.
Maybe it's the much awaited and anticipated Cas
the Cas Cakery book,
recipe book that I'm still waiting for.
Oh, well, mine's very simple. I just have a couple of recipes that I can do variations of. But I do sell my courses and my recipes online, but I don't know. I'm going to write a book about my life one day. I just don't know that it'll be a recipe.
Yeah,
maybe that's the book. That's the book that we need. Exactly.
Yeah, we need that. And who would you want to make your next birthday cake?
I don't know if I'm saying it right, but her business name is Toowomba Creations. She's in Canberra.
She's got beautiful
cakes. I really I love her cakes. I actually scrolled back on her Instagram once and she has where she started, and I love that she's got that there. I think I scrolled back on her Instagram a few years ago. I love that she's got where she started. I think I sent her a message and I was like, I just spent an hour scrolling back on Instagram and I love your journey. I love her cake. She has a beautiful style.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. You might get a call on your birthday. I've got a cake for you.
And when are you going to come over to?
That'd be nice.
When are you going to come over to the UK so we can see you?
Any teaching?
I would really love to come to Cake International. I don't know if you got any
We'll have a booth. You will host you. Come along.
Yeah, we'll host you over.
We'll give you a chair, a microphone, some lights, and a place to bake.
I would love to come to the UK. It's actually on my bucket list. I really want to come and do a month in the UK because my ancestry is all Scottish and all of that. And they're all convicts that got sent to Tasmania. So I would love to come back and see. I have a real thing. And I watched Outlander and I'm obsessed with the scenery from Outlander. I'm one day I'm going to go to the UK. So yes, I would love to come to the UK.
You will.
Well, Cas, can I just give you a bit of a reality? It's March. And it's
you can see
snowing.
Out the window.
But that would be magical.
Although it's not
it's
sticking.
Warm all the time.
When you get to March in this country, the last thing you want to see is snow. I'm speaking from my own and Rachel's preference. We just want sun, but that's all right. We take what you get, right? And enjoy it. Make it possible. Listen, thank you so much. It was really fun to talk to you. It was an absolute pleasure. Great advice that you shared. We really appreciate it, Cassie.
It was honestly my pleasure, and I'm glad I could talk to you on International Women's Day. I feel like every day, really, we should celebrate being a woman every day, but I'm glad there is a day that people can celebrate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have a lovely evening.
I will. Thanks.
We did it. That's episode 17 of My Baking Journey. Season 2 is a wrap. But don't worry, season 3 is around the corner. We're just still recording with various interesting bakers around the world and share their inspiring stories with you. So we will be back very soon. Cassie, thank you so much for this. If you want to learn about Cassie, check out the show notes. All the information you need is in there. So talk to you soon. Enjoy your little break from us. Go back and listen to one of your favorite episodes again if you'd like to. But make sure you rate us and maybe even leave a review if you're feeling generous. Okay? Once again, this podcast is brought to you by Toowomba, best packaging for bakers designed by a baker. Learn more at www.toowomba.shop. Take care.